You are listening to Eat Meat Sparingly, a Word of Wisdom podcast. I am your host, Allie Esig. Summer is in full swing here in the Washington, D.C. area. My kids actually don't get out of school until mid-June. And so we start summer like way after everyone else has, but luckily they don't go back to school until the week before August. So for us, like this is right in the middle of summer. We are back from traveling to Utah. We just spent a whole month traveling to Utah, visiting family and friends, which we loved. But now it's back to real life. And my kids are in the house all day and we're trying not to do screens and TV. And so it's just chaotic. So if they interrupt me or if you hear kids screaming in the background, they're just playing with friends, having fun, living our lives, doing the best we can. So anyway, with all of that, it has definitely been tricky to eat the way I want to all the time. And I am a big fan of just doing the best you can with what you have in the moment and not giving yourself a lot of guilt, no shame, no guilt around any of this. So even though today's topic, you may feel a little differently about food after listening to this topic, it is so important that even when you learn more, that you don't bring more shame and guilt around it. Like, again, you just do the best you can with what you have, but knowledge is power and it does help to inform some of the decisions you make. I've been experimenting a lot more with things like soy chunks because they're in our pantry and all the food that I normally have in my fridge, we're completely out of. And so I've had to go grocery shopping, and some kids like certain foods, other kids hate them. Some kids are like, yeah, sure, I'll try this. And other ones are like, that's disgusting, mom. I feel like that's just what it's like being a mom, trying to feed her kids, regardless of if you're plant-based or not. All right, let's go to today's topic. Before we dive into it, I just want to let you know, I am actually not an animal person. Don't judge me. My kids have been begging for a dog or a cat for a long time. And I'm like, I just can't, I just don't have the capacity. Ironically, I'm sure when they like move out of the house, I'll get a dog or something. But right now, I just starting a business, trying to raise all my kids. I really don't have any extra bandwidth to take care of an animal. And so as I talk about today's topic, it really comes from the place of someone who's not even an animal lover. Like I'm clearly not plant-based for the typical vegan reasons, like loving animals and compassion and all that. If you come to me with your dog, I will be like, oh, hi dog. Like, don't touch me. I grew up with a dog. She was an outdoor dog and we just didn't, I don't know. She was just crazy. She was just really, really crazy. And so I didn't love being around her. And then we had a cat, but I never really connected with animals like I know other people do. And so that being said, when you listen to what I'm about to share, then you'll know that this isn't like some person who just loves animals and want you to love animals. Like, no, I just have learned this and really think that we all should be a little bit more mindful of our food choices for this reason. We'll start off. Let's go and dive into Doctrine Covenants 89 and about something that I at first didn't go plant-based for this reason. I didn't really care much about it, but as I learn more, it really does impact you. So in verse 12 of Doctrine and Covenants 89, it says, yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And in verse 13, it says, and it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used. It is pleasing unto me that they should not be used. I think about this a lot. It's not very often that the Lord has told us what pleases him. And when you really want to understand why it would please him, especially in these latter days, this information that I'm about to share will give you a greater understanding of why it would be pleasing unto him that they should not be used. Now, I feel like I do need to go a little deeper because people will always use the comma, the drama over the comma. There's a comma after the word used. And after that phrase, it says only in times of winter or of cold or of famine. And the drama around that comma is that later on that comma was placed in. So it used to say, it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or cold or famine. If that's the case, then why would he have used the word sparingly? If the Lord is trying to say, it's pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or famine or excess cold, right? And if you go deeper into verse 14 and 15, he specifies, as he talks about in verse 14, all the wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And in verse 15, he says, and these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. So it's very clear, like these are for us, but only in times of famine and excess of hunger. And it is pleasing unto me, they should not be used. So why would it be pleasing unto the Lord that they should not be used? I think the good old fashioned farm, the small farm, like the type of farm you think about from 200 to 300 years ago, where everyone was a farmer. In fact, if you go through my family history, it's like farmer, farmer, farmer. Everyone was a farmer. And that's because that was a totally different system. That was actually really great for our environment and even for the animals. Like they were living to the fullness of their creation. They were able to be outside. They were able to live the lives that they are meant to live. And the way that we farm now, in order for all of the people on this planet to eat the amount of protein and meat, animal meat that we desire, the only way to make it available at the prices that is available at is by factory farming. Factory farming and just the livestock production that we have now. Now, factory farming is basically when large numbers of livestock are raised indoors in conditions intended to maximize production at minimal cost. So these farms are often called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. And that's what I'll refer to them later on as well, these CAFOs. And a lot of the times that's where the problem is. It's not necessarily at just a small farm. It's the CAFOs. It's the factory farming that really creates a lot of the problems that we're struggling with today. Now, how much of the animal meat that we are consuming actually comes from a factory? How much do we eat comes from a factory? For cows, 74.4% of all cows that we're eating come from these CAFOs. For pigs, it's 98.3%. 98% of all pigs. Turkeys, it's 99.8%. For egg-laying hens, it's 98.2%. So 98.2% of all eggs that we're getting have come from CAFOs. And just chickens in general is 99.9. 99.9% of chickens come from a factory. And then fish is 50%. So about 50% of the fish that you can consume comes from a factory. So this is a lot. This is a lot of what we're eating. I know people are always talking about, well, I just make sure that my cows are grass-fed, blah, blah, blah. But 70% of us are not eating that way, cows. And even more so the chickens, which most people actually eat chicken more than any other meat. And that's 99.9%. So it really is a lot. And it's so important for us to really take a good, hard look at what is going on with the animals. And this doesn't even address the environment. And I'll go into great detail about the environment in another episode, but there's so much there that I wanted to separate just animal welfare from the environment. Many consumers have no idea as they pursue the grocery store aisles, the suffering animals, the suffering that they encounter prior to making it to their plate. The remote nature of raising and killing livestock makes it much easier to consume animal-based foods without understanding the repercussions of current factory farming practices. Now, unfortunately, the only plausible way to ethically raise livestock is through small local farms, which I talked about. But this isn't sustainable for the global demand of animal products. In addition to the lack of land, we don't even have enough land for the sustainable farming of animals to feed this demand. Farmed animals are in warehouses and they typically have little access to fresh air, and it's designed to maximize efficiency and keep costs as low as possible. And sea creatures are not exempt from all of this. They can also be treated unethically, and not just by factory farming, but also just in how we fish. A lot of times the fishing methods will pull out tons of animals that are not meant to be caught. And it's just the bycatch of the process. And killing sea mammals like dolphins and whales and otters and sea lions often happens in the process of trying to catch other fish. And I could have a whole episode on that I won't even go into. That's all I'm going to talk about when it comes to fish, but there's a lot that goes into this process. But I first want to start by talking about chickens. 99.9% of all chickens come from factory farms. And here is the fascinating part. If you were to take a guess, just guess, how many chickens do you think are killed every single year worldwide for our consumption in the process of consuming them? I had no idea. I had no idea that the number was as high as it really is. It is anywhere between 75 to 80 billion with a B, billion chickens are killed every year worldwide. 75 billion of those are killed just in the process of eating chicken, like we think of like eating chicken. And then there's the other about 5 billion or so that are killed in the process of egg laying. And so with that, egg laying process, whenever these chickens lay eggs and they're trying to grow and raise egg laying hens, the chickens that are hatched and the male chicks, they're actually separated and they're cold. Cold is another way of saying killed or left to die. So female chick, they survive, right? Because they want them to raise more or to basically lay more eggs. And then the male chicks are instantly cold. They're instantly killed. It is probably the most terrible process out of all of this. Instantly they live, but honestly, they have a better life in the sense of they just die because the females that live, they often have their beaks clipped. It's very painful and it keeps them from pecking each other. And these warehouses are super, super cramped. Egg laying farms have tens of thousands of chickens, which means many die from dehydration, from starvation, from excess ammonia, from manure that's under their cages or getting stuck or caught in wires, from mechanized food delivery malfunctions. There's so many things. And even cage-free regulations are still limited in their freedom. And both types of hens, cage or cage-free, are bred to produce high amounts of eggs, which causes a prolapsed uterus that can lead to infection and death. Additionally, the practice of forced molting can be used to get birds to lay eggs quicker. And this usually consists of starving them for about 2 weeks after they first lay eggs to get them to produce more. It's a terrible process, and it's how most of us get our eggs. Now, of course, this is not how I have a couple friends that have their own chicks and they do their own thing, right? That's a totally different experience. But most of us, when we buy eggs and we go to the grocery store, this is what the chickens had to go through to get there. And that doesn't even include the chickens that we're eating to eat the meat every day that are often raised and to get as big and as fat as possible. So the difference between the chickens that are raised for meat, they are called broilers, right? So they are the chickens that are raised for meat. And similar to egg-laying chickens, there's extreme overcrowding. Chickens are packed by the tens of thousands into windowless sheds, often with less than a square foot of space per bird, barely enough to spread their wings. And there's a lot of rapid growth, which breeds pain in these animals. They've been genetically selected to grow unnaturally fast, reaching slaughter weight in just 6 weeks. And so their bones and organs can't keep up, which causes painful deformities, heart problems, and even lameness. And just like we talked about with the egg-laying chickens, the ammonia burns from their waste, that birds also have side effects and issues from that. Now, birds who are broilers often stand and sleep in their own waste, which leads to that ammonia buildup in the air that burns their eyes and skin and causes respiratory damage. There's no natural light or air, and chickens live in artificial light 24/7, used to manipulate eating behavior and growth. Fresh air and sunlight are completely absent from most chickens' lives. Again, how many of these chickens are we eating? 99.9% of the chickens that we eat for chicken, when you're making your chicken dinner, that's the type of life that they led. They also are debeaked and mutilated, although less common in broilers than laying hens. Some still undergo painful beak trimming to prevent stress-induced beaking in the crowded conditions. And despite the idyllic farm images on packaging, these birds never touch grass, right? They never touch grass. They never see the sun. They do not get to perform the natural behaviors like dust bathing and foraging. They do not get to rise up to the potential of their creation, right? They aren't fulfilling their creation to the fullest. Painful transportation. At just a few weeks old, they're violently grabbed by their legs, crammed into crates, and transported long distances to slaughter, often without food or water in extreme temperatures. And there's high mortality rates. Many birds die before slaughter from heart attacks, from broken legs, infections, or even heat exhaustion. And this is all accepted as normal losses in the industrial systems. Plus, there's always that antibiotic overuse. To prevent disease in filthy conditions and to promote growth, chickens are routinely fed antibiotics, contributing to antibiotic-resistant bacteria and so many public health risks. And the sad, probably the worst part of it all, which makes me think about why the Lord said it is pleasing unto me if they're not used, is the suffering of their lives until the very end. Slaughter is often done at terrifying speed, with up to 140 birds killed per minute. And many are still conscious as they are shackled stunned improperly, and even scalded alive in defeathering tanks. It's a terrible life. I would never want to live that or even be a part of that. And the more you learn, then just what should I make for dinner tonight? Chicken? Okay, no big deal. It just hits differently. Let's move on to pigs. Pigs is a little bit different and just as terrible, but pigs. So sows are confined their entire pregnancy in gestation crates. So about 4 months, and then they're moved to a slightly larger crate. So it's a very small gestation crate, and then they're moved to a slightly larger crate to nurse their piglets on the side. Now, sows typically nurse for 12 weeks, but hog farms wean at about 3 weeks to maximize efficiency in sow pregnancies. And due to high ammonia levels in these facilities, it is the leading cause of death of pigs in factory and farms. Piglets are pushed to grow as quickly as possible, which causes painful leg conditions. And pigs are highly social, intelligent, and playful creatures. They literally are like one of the smartest animals. They're as smart as a 2-year-old. In fact, if pigs, instead of hooves, if they had fingers, they could sign. They could communicate through sign language. They're that smart. But many of them are deprived of any of these tendencies to express their playful tendency. And crated pigs are known to bang their heads against the cages and bite the rails or develop aggressive behaviors that result in their tails being cut off to prevent tail biting and male castration. It's so sad. It really is so sad. We're going to move on and let's talk a little bit about dairy cows. So dairy cows, these are the milk producing cows, and they're often raised to breed calves and are separated from their offspring relatively quickly to maximize milk consumption. So this separation occurs annually, and the lamenting sounds of the mother cow can be heard when this occurs. Like mothers feel the loss of their calf and they cry. They cry. In fact, if you live next to a dairy farm, you may hear this when this happens, when they're separated. And male calves are no longer used as breeding stock just due to being outnumbered. And so they're often sent to be slaughtered at 5 months of age and are sold as veal. Now, what about the other cows? Like just cattle for beef, not just for dairy, but for beef. Well, beef cattle are able to graze outdoors. Like, woo, yay. They're like the one animals that can. It's not great. They can graze outdoors for a few months of their life. That's why when you're driving across America, like we often do, you will see cows outside. Unlike other animals who often never see the outside until they're sent to be slaughtered. That's why you don't see these chickens and what's going on, because it's all done indoors. So grass-fed cows are still sent to an indoor facility feeding on a unique mix of legumes and hay. They just were lucky and were able to eat grass as well. And they spend the rest of their lives in these crowded feedlots that consist of grains and soy feed to fatten them up. And a feedlot can hold more than 100,000 cows living in dirt that is caked in feces and a strong smelling environment that can cause respiratory diseases. You know it when you drive past one. I drove past a factory farm with beef just a couple months ago around my birthday when we were driving to go from Salt Lake to St. George, and you can smell it. It's very strong, and it does cause respiratory diseases in humans who live close to it. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about slaughterhouses in general, because it's important to understand this and all of the effects, not just on the animals, but on the humans who have to do the slaughtering. So first of all, animals can spend hours without being fed, subjected to extreme temperatures as slaughterhouses become more consolidated and the transport can take longer. Legally, there are very loose sanctions on how long they can go without being fed. So usually it's around 28 hours for cows and pigs, and there's actually no limit on poultry at all. Now, sometimes the animals are so weak that they cannot stand. They already have all these leg issues because they grew so fast, right? But which if they can't stand, then legally that means that they can't be slaughtered. So what they do in these moments is they shock the cows to get them to stand up. So they're shocked right before they're killed. There's a federal act that requires certain humane methods to slaughter animals. However, due to the fast assembly line of slaughterhouses, it is estimated that as many as almost around 1 million, maybe 1.7 million cows are stunned more than once or remain conscious during slaughtering. So they remain conscious or they're stunned multiple times just to get them to stand up. Now, birds and rabbits don't have any minimum requirements. And as many as 500,000 birds are still conscious when they are dunked into boiling water for easy feather removal. Now, we talked a lot about the animals and I just glazed over. We just went over the surface of it, right? We didn't even go that deep. But I think it's also really, really important to address the human welfare of all this because someone has to work in these facilities. And slaughterhouses can be a very dangerous place to work, especially given the fast-paced nature of the process, as well as the use of sharp objects and that repetitive movements, right? And so a lot of injuries, as you can imagine, occur. But more than that, it's the psychological trauma, the trauma in these humans that comes from witnessing animals being killed day in and day out. This isn't your backyard farm where you have to kill the cow once a summer. These people it's just kill, kill, kill all day in and day out. And what that does to your soul. Many workers in these environments are from marginalized or vulnerable populations and often aren't able to seek adequate medical care or experience any type of therapy for these type of conditions. And even more recently, the US Labor Department discovered children as young as 13 years old working in meat packing plants, working overnight, cleaning up kill floors, meat and bone cutting saws, as well as other dangerous machinery with abrasive chemicals. And all of these things contribute to what makes factory farming as low cost as possible, which maximizes profits. Now, what are the best practices? Now that you've learned all of this, and again, we just skimmed the surface. This isn't a video. If you really want to go deeper, there's lots of different videos you could watch online. One I know of is called Dominion, and it's based off of the scripture, and Adam was given dominion over all of the animals. And it's kind of crazy to think what we've done with that dominion, but also I always go back to is these animals cannot rise up to the measure of their creation. We haven't allowed them to fulfill the measure of their creation. Birds can't be birds. These chickens can't be real chickens. They can't live the measure of their creation. And so no wonder it pleases the Lord that we eat meat sparingly, because if we're eating meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day in and day out, we're having eggs for breakfast, right? We're having chicken for lunch and maybe chicken for dinner. You see the impact that it has on the animals in order for us to eat as much animal meat as we want. So what can we do? What if you really like to eat meat? What can you do instead? Factory farming is inherently cruel to animals, period. Hopefully you understood that from everything we talked about. And besides opting out of eating animal-based foods, which obviously would be the best way, but some alternatives that you can seek for more humane treatment of animals can just be connecting with local trusted farmers through cooperatives or local market stands, things like that. Terms like all natural or free range or humanely produced and pasture raised, they're actually not regulated. So even organic labels are not extensive in their definitions. And GAP certified or certified humane and animal welfare approved. Despite these labels, there is no way to guarantee that there was no animal suffering in the production of the animal-based foods you are consuming. There's no way to guarantee it. The egg industry exploits the most animals, period. While eggs are so complicated because I could do a whole episode on eggs. They're complicated because if you don't have high cholesterol, like it's totally fine to eat them. But if you have high cholesterol, I would definitely suggest not eating them. If you have a high risk of cancer, I would suggest not eating them. But they do have a lot of nutrients like B12 and choline, which can be good if you can't get them from other ways. Anyway, but if you're looking at it just from animal welfare, just from an animal welfare perspective, the egg industry exploits the most animals. Period. All of those male chicks that are cold right away, on top of the female egg-laying hens and the terrible lives that they have to live. And eggs are extremely affordable. Like they're extremely affordable for all of these reasons. For the insufferable conditions on egg-laying hens, it makes it to be able to continue to stay affordable. And it's just sad. It's just sad. And when you know better, hopefully you do better. Again, I'm not here to give you a guilt trip. As I said at the beginning, I'm not here to make you feel terrible. And I'm not here to push compassion on other people because they've shown, and if anything else, I know this from my own kids, that when I force them to do something, they're not going to. But I think there is power that comes from education. And the more you know about the industry, the better you do. And a lot of people, their excuse is, well, I'm not eating that. And that may be true. For cows, you can choose like a grass-fed type of cow situation because only 70% of cows, only 70% of cows come from factory farming. But when it comes to chickens, it's 99.9%. 99 point, and it comes to your turkey, 99.8%. Pigs, 98.3%. It's a different situation. And yeah, you could choose fish, 50% of fish. In fact, if you were to just go fishing on your own, that's probably the most humane way of consuming meat because you're not going to get bycatch and you can choose your own fish, right? That type of situation is going to be totally different. But in general, it does really bring new light. And I hope it brought new light for you on Doctrine Covenants 89, when the Lord says, "Is pleasing unto me that they should not be used," except for you can use them in times of winter or cold or excess famine, because I think there is times like we do have dominion over those animals, and they are, in verse 12, right? "I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving." Like, yea, flesh and the beast and the fowls of the air, they are ordained for the use of us with thanksgiving. Are we even at least thankful for these lives, these animals' lives these terrible lives that they lived in order for us to have meat on our plate, right? Are we at least thankful for that? That's one simple thing you can do, but also even just swapping out one meatless meal a week, just eating meat a little bit more sparingly, just can really make a big difference. It's also really interesting that when someone goes vegan, they can spare approximately anywhere between 100 and 200 animal lives per year. And that all depends on their previous diet. And surprisingly, and I didn't even go into much detail into that, but surprisingly, most of those lives that are saved are actually going to be from fish. Fish and shellfish are counted by weight, not individual lives. So the number of sea animals killed is massively underreported. One study estimates that the average US omnivore seafood consumption translates to about 12 to 15 fish, 60 to 100 shellfish, right? If you think of all the little like shrimp, things like that you're eating. But in general, there's a lot of the bycatch, a lot of the fish that is killed in the process of getting the fish that they're looking for. And so it is a pretty impressive that you can make such a significant impact on animals' lives by just choosing to not eat them or eat them more sparingly. And I think this is an issue that's a topic that's hard to hear, but so important for us to hear. I think everyone just needs to understand. And I just skimmed the surface. It just made it digestible enough for you to listen to it. And then we move on because it's so sad. It really is so sad. And it makes sense that I can please the Lord in this way by just eating less animal products, by choosing to have tofu for dinner or beans. That's how I did it at the beginning. I just ate more beans. That was it. I got plenty of protein. And especially nowadays, when if you're worried about protein, then you can take a protein shake, right? It's so easy. It doesn't have to come from animal meat, and your choices matter. And what you do can actually make a really large impact. And I think just so that animals can fulfill the measure of their creation. I know that's important for the Lord. I know. And the way that we're factory farming does not make that possible. If you need more help and support on how to do this, on how to actually make food taste good, a lot of people are like, "Oh, but it's so expensive if you try to eat healthy." I'm like, actually, no, if you go plant-based, you save a ton of money. It can be easy, it can be cheap, and it can be delicious. And that's why I have my Plant-Wise YouTube channel, so that you can see all of the recipes there. But also, if you need a little bit more help and support, I have my membership. And even if you join for 30 days, I have a 30-day free trial that you can check out, and I'll make sure to include it here. Even if you just join to see, okay, how do I do this? How do I structure my plate when I'm not planning my meal around chicken or beef or pork? How do you do it? Or turkey, whatever it is doable and it is delicious. I promise. You just have to be willing to try and learn some new things. And so check it out. I would love to see you inside. I'm here to support you and help you. I feel called to this work for many reasons, and I think this is one of them. This is somewhere where you can actually make a large impact on this world. And it's simple. It's just how you choose to eat. And it's good to know that you can make a difference and you can make an impact for good. All right. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Eat Meat Sparingly, a Word of Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Ali Esig. And if you need more help and support with transitioning to eating more plants so you can lose weight and improve your gut health and just reduce your risk of chronic disease, then make sure to check out my Plant-Wise membership. That's PLANTWHYS, because I like to teach the why behind eating more plants. But if all you need is just a couple more delicious recipes that feed your family and everyone loves, and not to mention super simple and easy, then make sure to check out my YouTube channel, which is also Plant-Wise. PLANTWHYS. Hope to see you there.